Hi, this is Privateer Station, and today we bring you day 532 of Russian invasion into Ukraine. As always, with former advisor to the Office of the President of Ukraine, Lieutenant Colonel Olexiy Arestovych, and Russian opposition politician, lawyer, and blogger Mark Feygin. Special thanks go today to our longtime supporters Klavs Preditis and John Afseth, and also our new member, Onur Beykos. Thank you guys, we do appreciate your support. And with this, let's go to day 532. Enjoy. Dear friends, glad to see you all here. It's Wednesday, August 9th. Time is 10 p.m. in Kiev, same time in Moscow. Day 532. A special day with Olexiy Arestovych. Why is it special? Well, a lot of events happened. Let's discuss them. Alright, let's go into this. And before we jump into the topics of the day, you remember what I usually say. Please try to fulfill all these things to help us promote the videos. Let's start first of all with that explosion, and in general, explosions and fires in Russia that look like an answer to their actions. Even though Moscow did another missile strike on Ukraine as a retaliation to that. But Sergiev Posad, that's the explosion near Moscow. How effective are these actions? First of all, Mark, we don't know whose operation it is, and even if it is an operation, even though some witnesses did mention a drone that was hovering there, but we understand that some people, when they get scared, can see a lot of things. They can see a flying saucer and many other things. Neither Minister of Defense nor Special Services of Ukraine have taken responsibility for that yet, so it's difficult to point fingers, but at this point we know that this is a factory that manufactures optics for Russian military devices. And according to some data, they had some components manufactured for Russian UAVs, Landsats, and they give us enough trouble on the front lines, so it's not surprising that grief has come to their house. And the explosion was noteworthy. I think this factory for a long time will not be able to stay effective, even if it manages to somehow continue to produce things. And whether it's Ministry of Defense, Special Services of Ukraine, or Lord dropped something there, it's good. Russia already is accusing Kiev of that. They shot a missile into Zaporozhye region. Yeah, they did, and they hit another multi-story civilian building, supposedly Iskander missile, and basically killed more peaceful citizens, civilians. This is war. They keep accusing us and everything and keep shooting us up for already over a year and a half. Do you remember at least one shot, one attack by Ukraine onto any of the Russian civilian targets or residential dwellings since the beginning of war? Well, yeah, that's right. Well, their representative is now saying that as a result of this strike on the factory, 1 person dead, 4 more wounded, and there'll be more data coming. Well, yeah, they can be saying more, but the thing is, we never ever in this war attacked Russian civilian multi-story buildings, Russian civilian residential targets. Regardless, I partook in some actions early in the war about destroying certain targets. If there was a risk of hitting civilian target, we did not. We called off the strike. So, yeah, that's who we're fighting with. Alright, let's go talk about the front. Right now, Russian propagandists are saying that Ukraine is evacuating civilians from Kupiansk. I have not heard that Ukraine is evacuating anyone. They indeed started some motion towards Kupiansk. This flank was hanging over for a while. and we were expecting it to start moving. We were thinking they'll start this maneuver later, but they decided to do it now, and they started. So, if there are no official notes and mentions of on the Ukrainian side about evacuation, then we probably should not be discussing evacuations because there are no real signs of that. This group is about 100,000 troops on the Russian side. You can see three arrows, and they're going in, there's three directions here. They also keep attacks in Liman area, and you know why they're starting them now? Yeah, because they are crumbling in the south. They opened a third direction on that northeastern front in order for us to drop reserves in that area. And we'll see what we do in response. I don't think they will be too successful. I'm skeptical about their possible successes in that area. What if we look at towards Svatova? There was a lot of pull and push there, right? Even on deep state, it goes one way or another. Deep state now shows some blue there. Yeah, it's both sides taking actions, attacking, counterattacking. So there's no general change of the front line. Situation where your enemy can still conduct counteroffensive operations is not a good indicator to say that, hey, this part of the front is already ours. It is not, as long as the enemy is active. Okay, Bakhmut, to the north of it, you can see some fights, you can see territories deoccupied from Russians. And also if you go down, Klishevka, Andreevka, and Kurdyumovka, they are actually painted on the Ukrainian, or at least partly on the Ukrainian side here, which is rather surprising. On Russian side, they have a general advantage in troops in that area, and this military mystery will require certain investigating after the war, why having numeral advantage they withdraw. Avdiivka, there's a lot of action here, but we're holding, and they just keep wasting troops at our fortifications. Yeah, we Pervomaiska as well. They push, we push. Tactical actions without operative meaning. Basically, they're going from the position that we have to do something. So that's something they're doing. Marinka still holds. Let's go down south to Staromayorska. Evil tongues on their side, as we like to say, they start crying that Urozhaina has some issues there for the second day already. And they've been surrounded on three sides, and Ukrainians are already in the village. And let's pray for their soldiers. So, yeah, there's definitely motion happening. You can see a little tongue protruding down south in the middle of the map we're showing, towards Volodina, towards that red diamond at the bottom. So that one is increasing. Also Priyutna, then one to the left of it, the blue protrusion is also expanding. And you can see the action goes around Priyutna, kind of semi-encircling it. Also, let's look at Rabotina. If you look at that, the line of front, and you can trust deep state, is pushing further and further south, encircling the village from the southeast. And, they may find themselves in semi-encirclement. Their supply routes may be cut off. Many things may happen there. So they definitely are concerned with our motion in the south. And the nature of it is not so much about capturing territory as about grinding down their enemy's capability to fight. We are doing our military actions then and in those areas where we can cause the greatest harm to our enemy. If you can look at the numbers of the artillery systems lost, they actively started to bring MLRS systems closer to the front and start losing them as well, because they're losing proper artillery. And this is all good developments. And also on the left bank, some of their papers are screaming that Ukrainians captured 3 perches already on the left side. I cannot support that because our official data is not released yet. and actually refuting some of the statements published on the Russian side, but according to radio intercepts and statements of the correspondents, of Russian military correspondents, they do confirm that there is a lot of activity happening. Which areas do we know them? Well, they're talking about different ones. I should not be the one bringing them up. So let's say Казачья лагеря, the one on the 3 o'clock on this map, right? Yeah, that area. You called it, Mark, not me, but yes, they did mention this area, and they said to the north of it they have a lot of losses, and they were screaming that there's a lot of blood and it's mobilized troops they're accusing on the Russian side that they couldn't stand and they fled, as if mobilized are not Russian army. They are. The Russian military, that's what they are now. All right. So I think we're good on the map, right? Yeah, I think without major changes, and there were some shellings of Zaporozhye, of course. We have about 100,000 already. 32,000 did click the like button. Then let's talk about several more news that are somewhat politically important. I'm looking at this one. CNN published results of the voting, of the polling they've done. They actually do pretty good polls, and they try to do representative ones. Compared to who, Mark? Well, with some other European polls and all. Well, okay. This one was about the opinion of Americans on Ukraine. They polled over 1,200 people. There are a lot of technical elements of data that probably not worth diving deep in, but overall conclusion is that support to Ukraine remains rather high. And Americans mostly insist on continuing the military support to Ukraine. Yep, they do. Kirby recently made a statement that he doesn't see any signs of weakening for the military support from the United States. Biden finally agreed to prepare F-16 pilots from Ukraine aviators. So, yeah. We cannot say that everything crumbled and nothing is being supported, right? We still get a lot of support. Germans, by the way, sent us another package, among which were 2 Patriot systems. This is a very serious present. So we cannot say that anybody has abandoned anything. Plus, there is a ton of engineering equipment coming in, bridge builders, evacuators for heavy equipment. So it tells us that we are preparing for more active actions. Then to the next question. At the end of August in the United States, Republican primaries start, and the fact is that Trump has more than other candidates in his party. And everything is... Mark, I'm not too concerned with Trump's arrival to the office, if that happens. Moscow can hope for anything, right? They've been singing him asanas even the last time, and then somehow it didn't work for them. And by the way, he was the one who gave javelins to Ukrainians and other systems. So United States is a huge political system. Not a single president can do completely adventurous politics outside of the system. There are lots of checks and balances there, and they do correct each other. And by the way, for example, there is this organization, right? United States Congress, they also take care about many things. So everything is all right, Mark. I'm not too concerned with that. I'm not too concerned with Trump's possibility of taking office. All right, we've been live for 14 minutes. Here is another somewhat interesting piece of news. So this one is about Africa. Regardless, do we want it? Do we not want to talk about it? France denounces accusations of the coup that leaders in Niger that accuse France of violating airspace and liberating some of the terrorists, as the coup leaders branded them. And Paris media is communicating today that this flight was done by Ministry of Defense of Niger and nobody was liberated. But we didn't need to mention that the strain around this situation is growing and the forces of the countries united in the Union against the coup. They called it ECOWAS, and they're going or intending to overthrow that junta, and it seems like West is supporting them. Well, Mark, this country is mostly francophone, right? So they're definitely connected with France a lot, to a high degree. I don't know if France is actually going to participate in the military operation. Perhaps something is happening behind the curtains, but for now they're just talking. They're just making the statements. I think Blinken and Victoria Nuland also communicated with representatives of junta, and this actually gives a weird signal to other juntas in African continent that you can actually conduct a coup and then America will even come and talk to you. So I don't know what American diplomacy is looking for. Perhaps they want to talk about different measures of benefits and less expected consequences. So I think the economic situation in the country is rough. They're actually talking about maybe not having enough electricity for everybody. So America might be playing the economic game with them and perhaps playing the cards that, hey, you guys, if you indeed insist on junta, things may get worse or maybe not. Perhaps you need one to bring the president back. You know, West usually tries to first resolve things with peace and sanctions and peace talks. So the West that we knew before, where are you? All right, President of the United Arab Emirates would want to organize a meeting of President Putin and Zelensky during the climate meeting that will be happening in autumn in Dubai. And this article, published in French, is referencing sources in Dubai that are discussing that meeting. Do you think it's possible? Of course, right, there could be a meeting with the president of Arab Emirates making statements, but behind that there could be a chance for some political discussion, right? Kind of behind the curtains. You mean behind the curtains meeting of Zelensky and Putin? Well, I don't know, behind the curtains or whatever, an official one. I don't know. I think Putin will never be asked about that in Russia, so nobody will be talking. Zelensky will never go to that meeting without having answers to certain questions that he posed already. Ceasefire, exchange all prisoners, territorial integrity. What chances are for us to see and the answers to these questions? Probably zero. So all these meetings behind the curtains, these are, I think, fantasies of some parties around this war. Well, regardless, yeah, I agree with you. This is probably a fantasy world, but Erdogan also tried to organize that. Yeah, you can organize, you can announce it, but will the sides come to that meeting? I would say that Putin is more willing to set up direct contacts. Well, of course, he is losing a war. He is willing to talk. But are we willing to? I do not see any basis for such negotiations until we get serious and strong negotiating positions. Until we reach the sea, I don't see anything possible to discuss. Not even sooner than October, I think maybe November. So for now, we're just grinding through their occupant equipment and armies. So you don't see any perspectives about that. Well, Mark, there are conversations on this topic. You see them 500 times a day. So I'm somewhat numb. A very, very low probability. I know a little bit how meetings of presidents are being organized. I would say the probability is, can there be a negative probability? It's near negative. That's what it is. All right, we have been live for about 20 minutes. We have a little more time. Poland is considering an opportunity to close cargo routes on the border with Belarus, as stated by one of the Poland officials to the interview. And there were news about Poland fortifying the border. So despite the fakery about private military corps Wagner that were dropping some bombs as if they were going to Poland, but there is some serious action on the border, right? Yeah, Poles, they're pretty serious about these threats. They actually are bringing 2 brigades with some experience of having fought a war in Iraq. Of course, some time passed, but they do have traditions and some experience. So they're bringing those 2 detachments to the front, to the border. They're also bringing special services, and the meetings between presidents of Lithuania and Poland also indicates that they are not treating it lightly, this threat. And frankly, if Polish bodyguards are being thrown bricks at, the next logical step for that escalation is shots fired. So they are taken seriously. And there are some trainings. I don't know the details of those. As Poles said, perhaps maneuvers of the Belarus army close to the border with Poland. And in September, there'll be official training, West 2023. Belarus will bring some troops, at least 10,000 troops. And ahead of them, there are some refugees storming the borders, which we've seen before. So that's definitely a threat, and Poland is preparing to that. 2,000 is on duty, 2,000 is resting, 2,000 are fortifying. So, do you think, a bigger question here, do you think Moscow, via all kind of proxies and useful idiots, will increase pressure on Kiev, but will not lead Ukraine to any results? Do you think they can do that side story in Belarus and Poland to try to motivate the West to conclude this war? This is a very slippery slope, Mark, because with these actions they can motivate the West to increase aid to Ukraine and get into more trouble. But what options do they have? Well, they try to trade. They try to trade all these escalations for possible concessions. So until the trainings on the Belarus side, the Rock 23 for the rescuers and the West 2023, the danger in that part of border, in that part of political world will only grow. And that situation may somehow explode and cause consequences. Poles are moving troops to the border. They do know some dangers, might not be even voiced out in the public yet. And it's not even middle of August yet. I prognosticated that situation to come to its peak in the middle of October, by the end of October. So it still has a long way to go. So Biden administration is talking that Politico published that Biden administration is going to publish a request for additional $1 billion to fund Ukraine, arms to Ukraine and other military support. But the sources did not give data about the exact number of requests and whether support for Taiwan is also be included in that. What's important, I think, Biden administration has $6 billion still that they can grant to Ukraine without any additional approval with Congress. They're already approved. So the logic, I think, will they be supplying important things? By the way, yeah, those 200 millions that Russian side tried to play and say, hey, the military aid is decreasing now, this was a accounting mistake on the Biden administration side, and they caught up later. They recalculated that and said, oh, okay, we need to give more. And Ramstein is still happening. Abrams are coming to the front, a battalion. So we can keep complaining about the volumes and some critical elements, but we still have enough volume on certain nomenclatures, and it's still coming. It's not dwindling. So I think we'll finish grinding them. I'm a calm optimist. October, exit to the sea, hello Crimean breach, hello Crimea, where things were blowing up today. There's something blowing up there daily, Olexiy, right? Yeah, Theodosia, Krasnogvardeysk, other military things were exploding. They're just continuous explosions, and the movement on the Crimean bridge keeps being interrupted daily. Daily, not a day without a big boom. Johann Sebastian Bach. Bach is the Russian word for boom. Yep, in the minor, Re minor. So Taiwan military tested their supersonic anti-ship missile, H3. Their channel CTS posted a publication. According to them, on a military base on the south of the island, there was a successful test conducted. So how is the current position of Ukrainian military production, defense military production? Maybe with aid of the West, that would be just Ukrainian, so you would not be able to. So you could be using your own things. Well, Mark, if we're not using the West arms against Russian territory and things keep happening there, which weapons are we using? Well, Moscow is thinking that you're using the Western arms. Well, they can think whatever. We used a couple of those Western things, but Moscow is considering a lot of funny things. They think that Kiev is the mother of all Russian cities and should be Russian. So wrong angle. Yes, it is mother of all Russian cities, but it is Ukrainian. They fantasize about a lot of things. But we actually, last thing I heard from our military is that they increased the payload for anti-tank Stugna device, and it's an anti-tank Javelin plus system, basically. So we are making things. It's just, in my opinion, we're producing way less than we could. It's a long and sad and difficult topic about production speeds, corruption, and other economic situations, which is probably a topic for separate discussion. But regardless, we're still making things, and booms in Russia are still happening. Swedes recently mentioned, by the way, via their prime minister, that Sweden will give us Archer systems, which is a very good wheel-based anti-tank 155mm gun. It is super effective for counter-artillery fight, and it shoots and deploys in basically seconds, and then you pack it back and leave. So there'll be a lot of booms happening in Russia. All right. So we saw in the news that Director of Military Intel of Ukraine, Budanov, was seen in Bulgaria meeting some officials. So he does leave Ukraine and meets his counterparts in other European countries. How much do you think it is true that he leaves Ukraine? How often he does? Well, indeed, there was communication. Minister of Defense did make a publication of him in a good-looking civilian suit. The head of Intel should not be sitting in a trench, right? Right. Well, that's not what I'm talking about. Right. He commands strategic level events and intel, and for that you do need to travel and do need to strategize and communicate with your partners. I am not at the moment is concerned that he is not traveling. He is definitely. And Bulgaria, by the way, they make a lot of ammo, and they have a lot of military tech that we can welcome on the front. So we can only smile when we see that news. This is good news. And there are no reasons to not trust it, right, Mark? Yeah, we just think that these visits are rather specific. It's not even political, right? It's the cooperation visit, the visit of to cooperate with different special and services and intel, right? So why this publication was made? That's a good question. Usually, Intel does not make publications or does not bring light to their gatherings, but for whatever reason, they did to this one, maybe to affect or produce some effect on Kremlin, to cause another itch there, and to show them that even Budanov can travel to see his counterparts around Europe. All right, we are live for 31 minutes. We have a little bit of time. So, to sum the results of JIDA, the new old foreign minister of China, Wang Yi, they're saying that at the end it was not the lover who was supposedly connected, of Wang Yi, who was supposedly connected to Britain, but actually political tensions between branches of Communist Party in China. So his quote now after JIDA is that China will support independent position. And I think that statement is like taking a metal brush to the Kremlin's butt. Yeah, I think Moscow would want them to be siding with them or being an ally or being something. But when China comes out and says that they will be emotionless and they will be participating in this format, Moscow will probably try to do everything to cause some emotions in China, but it's interesting, and it becomes, by the way, in some sort of regular format. By the way, all BRICS were in that summit. And BRICS would not go anywhere without Chinese approval also. So I'm thinking that Chinese are also routing BRICS to the side of emotionless. So Lavrov, Moscow Minister of Foreign Affairs, will need to work his tongue to wake up some emotions or passions in their Chinese counterparts, but I'm afraid he is not in good shape now to do that. So that may be a difficult task to achieve. And if, by the way, you remember, China was following territorial integrity of Ukraine since the beginning of this war, and that was not a good news for Moscow even then. But now, when practically on a peace summit where Moscow was not invited, China, after that, comes out and says that together with, first of all, they participate with BRICS partners that used to be Moscow partners in it, and then they come out and say that we'll be emotionless and independent in making our decisions. Remember that old meme where there are 6 black guys carrying a coffin and dancing? Right? Yeah, I remember that. That's a well-known memes. So it's being used pretty often. Yeah, so coming out of JIDA, all these statements, I think BRICS countries remind very well of these 6 tough guys carrying a coffin, and Kremlin reminds more and more of what they're carrying. So, after JIDA, from different sources, we see time and again they're quoting President of Arab Emirates, some Chinese consulting with Moscow. They're all still leaking the idea that perhaps organize a meeting between Zelensky and Putin. Well, it's very prestigious, Mark. So remember, a Saudi Arabian leader, the prince, who basically, after the murder of journalists in Turkey, became very toxic on the world arena. And even though he was hailed like Saudi Peter the Great, etc., and a reformer, and he spent a lot of effort to become non-toxic again, somewhat. And the fact that he managed to organize that summit in Saudi Arabia, that's a victory for Saudi Arabian politics. And I think they made quite a bit of effort to bring Iran and China to that table. So being a part of that process, even if you were a shadow at the meeting of Zelensky and somebody, or at least an attempt to organize that, then other people, other political leaders start to communicate with you. This is a serious political victory for Saudi Arabia, what they pulled through. And since they could, then probably Emirates want to also do something, and then Qatar will want to also partake in that. Turkey will, of course, come there and try to deepen that process. Everybody wants to participate in possible victory. As they say, victory has a lot of fathers. It's the defeat that's usually parentless. Got it. Thank you, Olexiy. Times is making publication that elite Ukrainian battalion Shaman is preparing for liquidation of high-ranking Russian military officers, that for over a year they've been preparing for special operations deep in the enemy territory, and now they got additional boost, and they are not talking about specific operations though. Do you guys have some elite battalion Shaman? Mark, we have a ton of different things. Maybe we do have an elite battalion Shaman, but I'm very skeptical when I see publications like that there are some operations to destroy, deep operations to destroy Russian command, because they're usually 50 or 60 kilometers out away from the front. And sending a battalion to do that, this, from a military standpoint, this is a horrible idea. Yeah, this is not like in the movies when you have those guys with faces painted black and reloading their weapon with the left hand while they're pulling the trigger with the right. Well, it's probably more, we usually take care of their military leadership with things flying into their hotels, or maybe they eat or drink something bad, but the whole battalion moving, or even parts of that, going that deep for some special operations, I'll leave it at the conscience of times. He reminds me of that movie where Miss Hudson was telling Sherlock, Times is writing that Lestrade is the best inspector. He's better than you. So, yeah, something like that. Okay, so we're doing a shorter stream today, 3 minutes shorter. We'll leave more questions for our next tag. We have about 130,000 with us, 53,000 click the like button. Do not forget to subscribe to Feygin Live, to Olexiy Arestovych, and to the privateer station if you have not done that yet and you're listening or watching that in English. Do not miss our next stream. Thank you, Olexiy, and thank you all for coming and joining us today. See you guys. Good luck. Till later.